You're listening to Everything Out There with your host, Steve Stockton.
Hello, friends. Steve Stockton here with you. Welcome to Everything Out There. Hello, and welcome back to Everything Out There. I'm your host, Steve Stockton. Thank you for joining me this evening. On the phone with me tonight is Lee G. Lee, come on in here. Tell us how you're doing.
I'm doing great, thanks, Steve. Thanks for asking me in.
Yeah, I've heard some of your fascinating paranormal stories before and supernatural, some of your brushes with the unknown there. Thought I'd like to have you as a guest and tell them to the audience here. So I'll give the floor over to you. You just start wherever you want to in whatever progression. They don't have to be linear. Just tell them as it occurs to you to tell them.
It's always a crazy thing when someone says, your touches with paranormal stuff. And I always think to myself, that's not really how I see it. I just see it as happenings. I don't wow it. There's no wow factor to me for it. There's some nutty things that have happened.
Yeah,
but
that was your normal. To other people, it might be paranormal and supernatural or whatever.
Yeah, to me, it was just a happening.
That's the way I was. I mean, I grew up around it and with it, and that was my normal. I didn't know until much later that those were paranormal things. I didn't have any concept of that.
Yeah, I mean, like I said, as a child, that the only time I was fearful of anything really was the one story as a child, the childhood part, which was my brothers and I just one of my brothers was sat in our bedroom. Our parents were out. My oldest brother was babysitting kind of thing downstairs. Me and my brother were sat drawing, and on the wall we had a picture that we'd already coloured in of a grass track bike, which is like motorcycles on grass. It's self-explanatory really, but we're sat there, it's warm in the place, there's no movement of air or anything like that, it's calm outside, all the windows are closed though, it's sort of winter time, and on this picture it puffed out, and from behind it you could see fingernails scraping down it, and you could hear the fingernails scraping down the picture that we coloured in. Well, I think it was one that I coloured in. So of course, seeing that, my brother and I looked at each other, just jumped straight out of our beds, dived towards the stairs, threw ourselves over the banister, falling all the way down the stairs to the bottom, ran into the living room, and we spoke to our older brother. Well, say spoke, went there in a blind panic saying, Phil, you want to see what we've just seen? And started blurting it out. So we ended up sitting on the sofa. My brother then said, I'll go and check upstairs, see if there's anything up there. And he's gone upstairs, he's come back down with a blanket, wrapped it around us, and he said, there's nothing, I've seen nothing up there. So we sat there, and about 5 minutes passes, and the same thing happens right in front of my older brother on a page 3. I know it's a funny thing, but it was the early 80s. On a page 3 calendar that my dad had by a fireplace. The same thing happened to that it puffed out and fingernails came down it. I mean, you heard the scraping of the fingernails down this calendar. Of course, my older brother then looked at us and realised we were telling the truth. It wasn't just a crazy thing that we'd just come up with. So one thing led to another. We waited for our parents to get home. They came home, and my brother told them all about it. We told them as well in our own individual ways. So our parents, concerned about it, the next day they phoned up a priest. The priest came round. We said the Lord's Prayer in every room. He was throwing water around as well, holy water. And he went off and did a check on the area about the any activities and stuff, to find out that where we lived was reclaimed land, and it used to be a marshland. And apparently a young boy had died there drowning. And it's kind of odd because obviously the scraping then that we saw maybe was him reaching for to get out of the water. So we kind of put those two and two together, and we thought it could possibly be that. We don't 100% know. And, people pass away in all sorts of ways, in all sorts of places. But it just happens to be coincidental that those sort of actions, and if you think about it, it went from the upstairs to the downstairs.
Yeah.
So
well, to me, that makes perfect sense. And I don't believe in coincidence. I think they're synchronicities. But that would be my best guess is what you ascertained there. Now, just to back up a little bit, for those that might not know, describe what a page 3 girl is. I know what it is, but I'm sure some of our listeners might not.
Topless ladies that used to be in the Sun newspaper. I'm sure some of you have heard of the Sun newspaper that we had here in the UK.
Yeah,
We
it's
still
kind of a
got the paper,
tabloid
but
thing.
yeah, it's a
And one of the
tabloid
most
paper.
famous page 3 girls that I can think of that went on to greater heights was Samantha Fox, who had
Yeah.
a singing career.
And
back in
Pamela
the day.
Anderson.
Yep.
Pamela Anderson's another one, and there's quite a few of them, weren't there? But I can't remember who it was on there. Linda Lusardi, maybe, or someone like that. That's another one. But yeah, I mean, my dad was a mechanic, so you could
Oh,
understand.
there you go. That
He
explains
could
that.
understand why those sort of things were everywhere, and he did a lot of racing and stuff. So, and like I said, to this day, I will never forget. And it was exactly that. I could tell that story over and over again. It come out exactly the same way, and it always has, because it was just so real, but so brief, but so poignant. What happened. I mean, you couldn't mistake fingernails scraping down the back of the paper, and not only that, with the finger marks. You know how if you put fingers onto a piece of paper and you scrape down it with your nails, it leaves like lines, doesn't it? It crimples into lines. Well, that's exactly what it did. But then when you looked at the pictures afterwards, there weren't none of that. So that was what was weird as well. It's all perfectly flat. And we couldn't have all imagined it, and definitely not all three of us.
Out from the wall, and it happened upstairs and downstairs.
Yeah, exactly. There was and no air movement in the place at all.
Yeah.
No heater movement either. Like of heat movement.
Just
none
out
of
of curiosity, were those in any kind of alignment? Like, was the poster on the wall upstairs? Was it diametrically opposed to the one downstairs?
Pretty much. Not exactly, but if you'd have gone upstairs, it was close enough. Yeah, it was definitely close enough for it to be a travel point, if you know what I mean.
Yeah.
From above to below.
Yeah,
and they
you said it
that,
more eloquently than I did, but that's what I was trying to get there.
Yeah. I mean, so if you imagined it left hand, right hand, left hand, right hand, left hand, right hand, kind of that, stretching out, trying to pull yourself up
and
or
just
whatever.
the image that conjures up of this poor lad drowning in the marsh and clawing at the sides of
that's exactly
how
we
was
saw
sinking in there.
Yeah.
It puts me in the mind like quicksand or something like that. Which was my big
we're
fear
thinking
when
boggy.
I was a child.
It was because it was a bog, like a swampy bog. So you imagine most of it is mud, but it's thick mud, which is worse than quicksand because, it's so dense it will just suck you in, kind of thing, like quicksand would do.
That was people my age. That was a big fear, thanks to television. I mean, any show you watched in the late '60s and early '70s, quicksand would get you. Bonanza, Daniel Boone. Gunsmoke, any of those, especially the westerns. So they were always getting in the quicksand.
Yeah, Tarzan as well.
In East Tennessee, we don't have quicksand, but I kept on the lookout for it. I wasn't going to end up in quicksand.
Yeah, not good. And
that's just such a frightening mental image of seeing that go down those posters and then out of sight. Now, did you have any further visitations from whatever that was, or did the
no? But the neighbors
did.
But the neighbors did.
Same print or same.
Not the same thing, but they used to have like noises up and down the stairs.
So if it's a bog, there's probably more than one person went down in it.
Well, you don't know what happened around there anyway. I mean, you're talking England's history is thousands of years old for a start. So
So there's going to be some incredible stuff there. It's
I think the information was something like the 16th century or something like that.
Yeah, there you go.
Got it from.
It's like that one guy there. That's somewhere in England. One of the oldest recorded hauntings, where he would see Roman soldiers marching through his basement.
Yeah.
And then with further research, found out that the level that the basement was at, that was the level of the old road.
The level of the ground, with
actually
the road.
Went through there during that time.
Well, you consider where our houses were, the water level or the bog level would have been 30 feet above. Because as you know, when they reclaim land and stuff to get to the clay level to build the houses on, because obviously we have brick houses, which a lot of time you want clay. And to get down to that clay level, they'd have had to have stripped all the the bogginess and stuff, and that about 30 foot, I'd have thought.
And
so
it's not as old by any means, but here in New England, where I'm at, there's a lot of history, a lot of stuff from the Revolutionary War here. My wife Nicole knows a guy that, as a child, saw Revolutionary War soldiers, or the apparitions thereof, in the woods in his backyard, and that whole area is full of haunted houses and sightings, and you never know what's going on that ground, going on that ground before, but chances are it's something. I mean, you had the indigenous peoples, the Native Americans, they fought with each other. Then they fought with the settlers, and then you had the Revolutionary War and the Civil War. So I don't think there's much place that doesn't have some taint or some
I
blood
totally agree.
shed
I
on
don't
it.
think wherever you are on the planet, there's someone's passed on. I don't think you can escape that. I think it's everywhere, isn't it? And I
Yeah.
think it's just.
And
I
it's
think
like
a
Stephen
lot of
King says, the ground is soured. And I believe
of
that.
course.
Another story with Nicole, we were driving around. She was showing me some places where she used to live as a child. And just as we turned down this one road, I said, this place feels off. There's something weird here. And she looks at me and she said, well, right down here is the apartment building where I had all these strange experiences as a kid. So it wasn't necessarily anything in that building. There was something
It was
with the
just
ground there that would have
tangible.
been
Where
anything that was built there would have had things in it.
yeah.
But so when the priest came in and sprinkled the holy water and said the prayers and everything, did that seem to
Well, it
put
seemed
it
to
in check?
alleviate it.
Or
Yeah,
I've heard of cases where that would just make it even more upset.
Yeah, no, it seemed to. We never saw anything again. Let's put it that way. It was a one-time only thing that we saw anyway. It was really, really strange. It was a phenomenon.
It makes you wonder: was it the anniversary of the kids'
Well,
drowning?
that's what I was thinking.
Yeah.
Maybe maybe it's a certain anniversary. I don't
Or,
know. I mean,
maybe
is it
the
a stain
100th
in time?
anniversary or something? Who knows?
Yeah.
But that's the kind of thing that rolls around in my head when I can't sleep at night. Is imponderables like that, like why that particular night, why that particular time.
And I do believe. I think a lot of. But see how I see it as maybe a stain on time and space kind of thing, right? But how would that explain marching men? Do you know what I mean? It's because that's not the moment they died. I can imagine, a traumatic experience leaving a stain kind of thing on
Yeah. And the
on
imprints,
time and space.
the stone tape theory, if you believe any of that certain types of rock, particularly things with a heavy quartz content, it can leave an impression. And if you think about an audio
like
tape or
like
video
photography,
tape,
like
that's
photography,
ferrous oxide on mylar,
Yeah.
and it's able
Yeah.
to record sound or images.
Yeah.
Well, why couldn't those stones do that? And
but there
I've
you
heard
go.
that theory put forth about some of the spook lights they see along old railroad beds that aren't railroads anymore, but the stone, the crushed gravel and things that those beds are made out of,
Yeah.
maybe that's how those lights continue to appear on tracks that are no longer there.
I think
Fascinating
it's
stuff to think about.
Yeah, I think there's definitely stranger things that happen on the planet than we can even comprehend.
Yeah, I think there's a lot that we're just not smart enough to comprehend or
I don't think
explain
it's
away
smart,
through
not
conventional
smart enough.
science.
I just think our senses aren't developed highly enough to be able to understand it or notice it because we don't need them, or we've grown used to not needing them.
Yeah, I think that's what it is. It's probably some innate ability that we're born with.
Yeah,
That old
fades over
adage,
time.
use it or lose it. We haven't used it. We don't need it anymore. We
There
have,
you go. So
Google and high-speed internet and things like that. You don't need those intuitive senses anymore. They've
there you
been
go.
bred
Yeah.
and technologied out of us, if you will.
And I think that's why some people are seen as strange, to be like empathic and stuff like that. Because I find myself quite empathic at times, and I think, well, that's just a lost normality. I would have thought, to feel danger around you. You know what I mean? I mean, animals do all the time, don't they? They still do. They'll know when a storm's coming. They'll turn and head the other way, or they'll know that a fire's started. It's 20 miles away, but they'll know and they'll start moving away.
Yeah.
And not only that, birds like being able to navigate the planet via the magnetic fields. It's if a bird can do that, I mean, surely residually we've still got some of those traits.
And I think we could at one time. I mean, you think about that. A bird's science or a bird's brain is about the size of a grape, maybe with a bigger bird.
Yeah.
Yet they can do things like that, like follow the same migratory patterns
exactly
twice a year for the rest of their lives.
Year after year after year after year, and then their chicks do it, and they grow up and they do it, and same as whales, they seem to know where to go. All the ocean creatures seem to know where to be and where to go. It's a crazy thing, but us humans, because we're inundated with technology, I think we're kept down purposefully, personally. But let's not get into that one,
And
because
plus,
that's
if
a whole
you
nother
want to get
rabbit
off
hole.
into strange theories, people claim that fluoride in the water has
Yeah.
caused our pineal gland to
Pineal gland to
calcify.
crust over.
And
Yeah.
the pineal gland is one of the
Yeah.
things, the seat of the third eye there, where
Yeah.
we got a lot of this intuitive and empathetic flashes and things, and we don't use it, and it's grown over, if you will.
Yeah. I think there's a lot to that. I think there's a lot to that. Like the way that
Plus,
humans
we're
are.
bombarded with electricity, high frequency sound, EMF waves of the whole spectrum, with your 5G and
Yeah.
fluorescent lights and high tension power lines and all that. I think that has an effect on us. How could it not?
I truly do. That's why I think we ought to keep at least our ability to comprehend things, beyond what we believe is normal, to
Yeah,
try and
and to
keep our
keep an
minds
open mind
open to,
about things.
open
My
to things that are open to at least possibilities
Yeah,
of,
and some things you cannot explain. You'll never be able to explain.
No, that's it.
My dad
But
was a
acceptance is the
scientist.
key on that, though, isn't it?
Yeah,
Acceptance is
exactly.
also the key on that, is we
And my
can't always
dad
know
was
everything.
a scientist out at Oak Ridge National Laboratory, and he would talk about how sometimes under controlled laboratory conditions, things would occur that weren't supposed to occur, and
Yeah.
they couldn't get it to occur again. They don't know how it happened or what caused it to happen. They can't replicate it, but yet they observed it in laboratory
Well,
conditions.
here's a perfect example,
Anomalous,
Mandelbrot.
irreproducible results.
Perfect example, Mandelbrot.
Yeah.
Okay, so you're talking about something that's as
Order
inner
out
as
of
it is
chaos.
outer. Yeah, order out of chaos. You can make any shape, and you'll find on the edges of it that same shape, and then it goes in again, and then that same shape, and with mathematics as well. They've kind of scientists have come to the conclusion that had to be created. Now that's profound,
Yeah.
because the mathematical difference that if you offset the universe by even a billionth of a fraction, it wouldn't exist. I mean, that's just incredible. It's just, how because it's perfect. It's perfect. How can it be if not created? So that's a very profound thing to me.
And my brother, who's passed away now, he was a minister. And I asked him one time, I was asking him some questions about the supernatural and the paranormal and stuff. And he said, well, from a biblical perspective, he said, all this that we consider the natural was spoken forth out of the supernatural. He
There
said,
you go.
the natural, the laws of physics and gravity and things like that, he said, those are man's laws. And
Yes.
anything out of the supernatural, those are God's laws, and nothing applies. Anything can happen. And that was, to me, that was profound and rather poignant. That was the best explanation of the paranormal and the supernatural from a biblical perspective I've ever heard.
And another point of fact is we only gauge time by the way our sun goes around our little galaxy, and how our planet goes around our sun. We've invented time to suit us on this planet alone. In the grand scheme of things, time is completely, like they say, time is relative, isn't it? You travel away from our planet at light speed and turn around a few million miles out and then come back. The planet is aged, and you no longer know anybody.
Yeah. Those theories and things like that, the quantum physics and things, it blows my mind, but yet it makes sense in a very unconventional way.
Yeah, it's a crazy thing. But shall I go to the next thing? Shall I?
Please. That one was a good discourse there. We got off into some strange territory, but that's what this show's all about. Everything out there, literally. So please, another story, if you will.
So I had a friend. She's passed on now. She considered herself a white witch. She was friends of a lot of bikers that I knew, and I used to stay around her house on occasions. Well, she warned me about her place because her place was a reclaimed graveyard, and not just her house. It was there was a little estate that was actually built on a reclaimed graveyard, and they moved the graveyard and the bodies to another graveyard. Well, she said to me that there was lots of activity in there, and this was at a time when really, even though I'd had that child experience, I don't know whether I just chose not to accept that those things happened, right? or it was just I blanked it out and pretended it didn't. You know what I mean? I can't really be sure on what it was at that age, but say I'm 19 at this time, or 17 to 19, between those ages. And I stayed at her house one night, and she said, if anybody hassles you, just tell them to F off. And I'm like, really? Yeah, you know, she said, don't forget, they're people too. And I went, well, yeah,
that's a strange concept, but it kind of makes
very
sense.
true.
And
No,
Cisco
but
and I have
they
talked
were,
about that.
you know, or they were people too, you know, treat them like people. And I thought, well, that's a good concept, right? I like that. So anyway, I've laid on her sofa, and I used to fall asleep to her TV. So I put the TV on. I'm laid down. About half an hour goes by, and I'm watching some crud on TV. I don't know what it was, but you know, it didn't matter. I sat there, and just from nowhere, I sort of hear shuffling, and I'm like, well, it can't be anything. And I just ignored it. I thought it was like maybe off the TV or something settling somewhere, or you know, like you do in a house, right? They move, don't they, and stuff, and the heat and whatever. And then I heard it again, and I'm like, wow, it's weird. So I carried on watching TV, and next thing I know, I felt, you know when someone sits on your lap, because you can feel the bones of their butt and their legs or whatever on you, can't you? You can feel it, you know.
Right,
obviously
right.
Not,
Very tactile sensation. You can't
there's
not
the
notice
weight
somebody sitting on you.
Yeah, it's weight as well. Well, I'm laid on there, and I straight across my upper thighs, I felt this weight sit on me, and I'm like, there's someone sat on me. And I just looked to where it was, and I said, get the fuck off me right now. I said, can't you see I'm trying to sleep? And as I said, get the fuck off me, whoop, it was like they put their feet down and got off, because I could even feel the pressure of the roll from their legs, yeah, over on my left leg. 'Cause I was laid with my right side towards the back of the sofa, yeah, settee or whatever you want to call it, the couch, and facing the TV. And you can tell when someone gets off because they put their feet down and roll off. And I felt the weight lift from the back side, and all the weight transfer to the front side, and then step off. And it was so profound. And the next morning I said to Maria, I said, one of those arseholes sat on me last night. She said, oh, that's probably Frank or something like that. She said his name, and it was a guy, like, and I said, yeah, well, you know his name. She says, yeah, I talk to him all the time. And I went, okay then. Still really, even though I had this thing, and it was totally the sensation of someone sitting on me.
He likes to sit on the guests.
No, apparently he was just sitting down. Didn't even think about me being there. He just sat down on the sofa, just took a seat. Didn't even think about, annoying me, or didn't think about me, kind of thing. That's what the hypothesis is, that she says this. She says he probably doesn't realise you're there. And I'm like, she says, like we can't see them, they can't see us, maybe. You know, you're coming up with these hypotheses. And I'm like, well, I don't give a shit. He shouldn't have sat on me in the first place. I was very matter of fact at that age, and she was very dismissive of my attitude. I can tell you that now. Because I said, yeah, it can't be that. It must be just, I must have had cramp in my legs or something. So I tried to pass it off. But, when time goes by, and then the next story that happened, that was it for me. It was convinced me entirely. I was out riding with a friend on motorcycles, and we used to always find a couple of roundabouts that were, linked by a road, and we'd travel up and down the road, round the roundabout, back down the road, round the roundabout, back that, and just keep going like a little racetrack. Yeah. Not stupidly, but, we used to just keep going up and down. We found this one place in a place called Bitton, where I live in Southampton. And we're riding between roundabouts. And on one pass, as we're coming back towards Bitton, we spotted this old lady hobbling down the road on our side of the road, the left-hand side. And she had a long coat on with, I can't remember what her footwear was, but I think it was like wellies or something like that. So long coat with not a hair net, but like a rain cover hat. It was just like I don't know if you've ever seen them. You know how old people used to wear like a piece of plastic over their head.
Yeah,
and
my mom had one that tied under her chin and everything.
Yeah,
a rain bonnet, I think it said.
Yeah, that's it, a rain bonnet.
She would get her hair done every week at the hairdressers, and she wouldn't go out if it was even sprinkling without a rain bonnet on.
There you go. Now, funny thing is, I can't remember colours, right? of this at all, but I know there was some sort of colour to it, whether it was a green coat with like a grey sort of bonnet. But regardless, so we see this woman hobbling down the road, and she was like proper hobbling, and we're like, oh, that was. And we rode past her, and I just looked back briefly, and then carried on with my friend. We got up a bit, and as I've looked back, she dodged off into the bush and into the side of the road, like, and I'm like, gosh, she looked really dodgy. She proper dodgy, and there's only like fields there. So I've slowed down, and my friend's come alongside me. I said, did you see that lady? And he went, yeah. I said, well, let's go turn around, Mush, because she looked. Mush means mate. Right? So we've turned around and we've gone back down the hill. We parked our bikes right where we saw her go into the bush. We've jumped off the bikes and we've walked across, and there was literally a tiny hedgerow. I mean, we're talking not even 12 inches thick. And we've stepped across this hedgerow, and it's just a great big open field. Nobody. We're like, where'd she go then? So we started scouring the field. He walked one way, I walked the other, and we were zigzagging up the field. And we both came to the point where we just couldn't find her. And we're like, well, that's strange. I hope she's all right. Yeah, I hope she's all right. We both said to each other, sort of thing. So we got on our bikes, and I said, look, let's go up the police station and let them know, because it was just up the road. So we've gone up to the police station. We stood at the desk, and this sergeant or wherever it was came to the desk, and he said, yeah. I said, it's a bit of a strange one. I said, we've just seen an old lady hobbling down the road. I said, and she disappeared into the bush and onto the field, and then we couldn't find her. She looked like she was in trouble, like she was hurt. And he went, another one, eh? And I went, sorry? He said, another one. Here, lads, got another one. He turned to the other officers in the place and said, yeah, we got another one. And me and my friend just looked at each other and just say, what are you on about, mate? Got another one. He said, in the I think it was in the 40s, late 40s. He said an old lady was walking down that road on her way home. She got hit by a lorry. She stumbled up the road a little bit, wandered off into the field, and died the other side of the hedge. And we're like,
wow, there you go. And she's sounds like she's doomed to forever repeat that, because you saw her fall and go out of sight, but there was nowhere for her to go.
There you go, right? There was nowhere there. We would have found her. We'd have found her instantly. So we said, are you winding us up? And he said, no. He said, we've had at least 12 or something like that. There was a double-digit number that he said to us of people that have come into the police station, reported exactly the same thing.
Wow.
And we were number whatever. So we weren't even bloody unique.
Vanish in the field. Don't worry, we know about it.
Yeah. It's just look, another one, lads. Yeah, that convinced me because I was with a mate. We were, totally in, within, the man's thinking, and as well, with a good bit of, lateral thinking and logical thinking, and it was a fully fledged person. It didn't look ghostly in any way, shape or form. It just looked like an old woman wobbling down the road. She turned into the field. As I look back, she's disappeared behind the hedge, and I just got worried, because she looked like she was hurt, So it's obvious that it was just so strange.
Just the
so
standard
strange
reaction. Well, let's go look for her, and then she's not there.
Well, let's go make
we
sure
better
she's
tell
all
somebody.
right, because she just looked bad. So like I said, we better go and check on her, make sure she's all right. Yeah, okay, let's go. Yeah, crazy thing. And then because we couldn't find her, obviously we were even more worried.
Yeah.
So the thing is, it's a moonlit night. You could see the whole field under the moonlight, so we just thought there was some ditch somewhere within that field that we couldn't see her, and she was, fell in or something.
Into something,
yeah.
or a hole, or an
but just
abandoned
literally
well,
nothing.
or some reasonable, rational explanation, but there was none.
Yeah, there was none. Yeah,
it's exactly like the kid that I saw fall in my yard and disappear when I was a child. I was only about 5 years old. He was a little toddler, maybe a year, 2 years old, running across the road at an angle down into her yard and fell. And then when he hit the ground, he just ceased to exist. I went right to the spot, didn't take my eyes off of it.
Yeah.
Wasn't more than 100 feet away. Nothing there. Nothing I could have
Because I
mistaken for
guess
a
you
kid.
thought he fell into a ditch
Yeah.
or a hole.
Did he fall into a hole? But I knew
Yeah,
every inch
yeah,
of that yard because I
yeah.
rode bicycles and played in it and things. I even went and got a shovel, went back and dug. Nothing there. And Cisco said, and you never put that shovel down. You're still digging for answers here some 56 years later. So there
Yeah,
you go.
yeah. I mean, metaphorically speaking, you're dead right. Yeah.
Yeah. And the thing about that is I gave up looking for answers to anything paranormal years and years and years ago. Now I'm just looking for the next set of questions. That's if we had all the answers, it wouldn't be near as much fun. The journey wouldn't have been as enjoyable as it has
Well,
been.
the journey's a nutty thing, and I mean,
Yeah.
talking about journeys, when I was very young, now we're going to get into some more oddly stuff.
Oddly, there you go.
That's why they call me oddly enough. So, as children, my brother and I used to escape our house a lot without going into it. So, one night we're out and we swore that the moon was following us. Okay, and this was my first experience of this thing, but I didn't realise until as adults, and I'll explain why. So, we used to always escape and go down this particular cutway. And on the way down this cutway, we always used to see this light following us. And why is the moon following us, we used to say. I mean, you're talking, I was 4, my brother was 6. So we continued to do this, and we've done this on several occasions, and we seem to have this thing happen fairly often. Not every time we did it, but fairly often this thing would happen. Well, when it came to be adults, we realised that the moon didn't come up in that part of the hemisphere. It came out exactly the opposite end of the hemisphere. So where we saw this thing following us definitely couldn't have been the moon. So that was my first idea.
But yeah, it was mistaken for that. That's amazing. I had a friend that I went to college with that had a similar experience when he was a small child. The same thing. He thought the moon was following him, and then it started coming down out of the sky, and it smiled at him, and it scared him, and he ran the other way. And then he thought, "Well, no, there's the moon. The moon was behind me the whole time."
Well, every time we saw it,
to
the
that
moon
day,
wasn't
he didn't
visible.
know what he saw that he thought was the moon, but it smiled at him.
Yeah. Well, like I said, every time we saw it, the moon wasn't visible anywhere. So that's what was crazy. That's why we thought it was the moon. Like I said, we were so young, we didn't really realise. So that was my first experience of something in the sky. And then the next one on from that, I'm travelling with my father back from the garage that we used to do cars at. We used to paint cars at the time. I ended up doing aeroplanes, but we started off with cars. And we're travelling back from the garage that he had. And right in front of us, above the motorway, off in the distance, was this orange orb. And I've looked at it, I said, "That's not the sun, is it, Dad?" I said, "What's that over there?" And he's looked at it and goes, "Oh, that's weird, isn't it?" And I'm like, "Yeah." And then as we're looking at it, it's blinked out. And we're like, "Well, that was strange." And we just looked at each other and went, "Oh, weird." Carried on driving. And then to the left of me, I've looked out the window to the left of me. And it's right there, right in the field, just adjacent to us as we're travelling along. I said, "Dad, look, it's there." I said, "How's it gone from there to there?" I said, "Oh, my, whoa." I said, "Is that a UFO, Dad?" And he said, "I don't know, son. I don't know what it is." And we just carried on looking at it. And then, as we got past a set of trees, we couldn't see it anymore. And I was more intrigued by it. And that really piqued my interest. And obviously knowing about the childhood moon following me thing, and realising that the moon comes up in the other hemisphere anyway, there's no way that could have been the moon. And so that was like, well, what was that? And then we see this other light, and it's in front of me, and then it's to the side of me. So that was story number 2. Well, then later on a fishing trip with a friend, looking out to sea. Oh no, actually, there's one before that. Let me do the one before that.
Okay, please.
We're outside of our house watching. We actually let lanterns go up ourselves in remembrance of one of our fallen relatives, kind of thing. And we've let these things go up, and we're watching them go up, and they're going with the wind, if you know what I mean. They're travelling upwards and sort of moving left and right and travelling upwards in a kind of odd sort of format. But you can tell even at a real long distance what these things are, and and they were all over the place. Actually, it was a funny thing. It seemed to be on a night that the the Chinese or whatever, or the Japanese were letting them off as well. It was like Chinese New Year or something like that. So we're watching these things go up, and I look off down the bottom of our road, and this is literally right outside our house where I live right now. And we're looking down the road, and above the trees, I see this light, but it's not. It's another orange orb, exactly like I saw when I was a lad with my dad driving along, and it started travelling across the houses. And I'm like, well, that's no lantern. And do you know what? I say it all the time. We had a program over here called Teletubbies, and they had the orange sun come up with a baby's face in it.
Yeah, I remember that show.
Right, well, they had like the beams of light kind of pointing out of it and coming in, going out, all the way around it. Where it was kind of doing that is like it was fake, but it was like liquid lava sort of thing, but an orangier lava, and you could see it all moving, like, you know. So it wasn't like a flame. These things were flickering. You could see the flicker of the flame with the lanterns. You could see that they were dark on the bottom, and it was flat, and it was rounded at the top, obviously, and there was flame, and then it got darker again at the top, and it was bright in the middle. This thing was bright all over, but the light didn't escape it, so it wasn't like doing, like, I can't remember what they call it, flaring or whatever it is, like a street lamp does when you look at it. You see flaring, don't you? It wasn't doing any of that. It was just a perfect ball of, like, moving liquidy light, and with these, like, fake bits coming out of it. Like, it was, it's just strange. And we watched it. And I didn't have a phone. We didn't have phones at the time, or we didn't have them on us. So I couldn't get a shot of it. So I ran in, first of all, to grab my video camera. And as I came out, it had gone so far off in the distance, it wasn't even worth trying to get anything of it. But it wasn't going upwards like all the lanterns were doing. It was just travelling in a straight line at a, I don't know how many miles an hour, but it was just travelling at one steady pace, So, and the lanterns weren't doing that. They were flickering and moving and different speeds and stuff, as they go with the wind. This thing definitely wasn't. So then,
it kind of makes you wonder if whatever it was saw those lanterns, and maybe it came to check those out, or it thought this would be good cover for me to fly in and look at other stuff.
Yeah,
because people will assume it's one of the lanterns, but then it was behaving unlantern-like, as you described.
See, at that time, there was 5 of us outside as well, so it was like 5 other people saw it. And do you know what? To this day, none of them have over-acknowledged it. But they did, but like didn't want to talk about it. So it's like it was non-existent to them, even though it happened, and they know it happened because they saw it. I made sure they saw it, So further on into time, on a fishing trip, so this is the first fishing trip. I've got a couple of fishing trip ones now. On a fishing trip, me and my friend Stag, actually, who comes on my show.
I've seen him on your show before.
Yeah. Well, we're stood there fishing, and we're just looking out to the horizon. And we're watching the ships as they, take half an hour to an hour to travel 3 inches kind of thing. You know what I mean? You can see the blinking light on them, and they're a ship and they're travelling along on the horizon line kind of thing. And then whilst looking out there, we see a green light. It's very similar to what I saw, but you can't tell because it's so far off in the distance. You couldn't tell if it was like liquidy or any of those things, but it was a green light, and it wasn't flaring or anything like that. It was just a solid dot of a light. And it wasn't a laser light as well, because it's just no way it could have been from the distance where it was and where it travelled. It basically travelled the horizon line, and it was seen and gone within about 2 seconds. And considering how long the ships were taking, that must have been about 2,000 odd miles an hour this thing went. So, it was just incredible. And even my friend, because I thought I saw it alone, and I even forgot that he was with me on that particular occasion. Very strange. So there was that one, and then I'm with the most nuttiest one not nuttiest one, because I've actually got another 2 more after this one.
Right.
But this one is the closest one. So I'm with my friend Lance fishing. He came to the one with the green orb as well, but he didn't see the green orb. But he and I alone are fishing, and he's about 20 feet away from me. And I'm stood there just watching my rod, and we're having a chat. We're mid-chat, and in mid-chat, I'm looking at the top of my rod, and I see this liquidy white light this time coming across. And if I held my hands above my head, It was about the size of a beach ball, I'd say. Yeah. So, not being able to tell though the distance of how high it is or how low it is, it's really weird. You can't really tell. It looks like you could reach out and touch it, but it could have been bigger and higher, or smaller and closer. It's just really strange. So I'm looking up at it, and I start shouting to Lance, look at this. And you consider 5 seconds ago, we've just been having deep conversation about something, and, backwards and forwards with the conversation. And all of a sudden, he's dead quiet. And I'm looking at this thing, and I'm calling, Lance, look at this, Lance. And he won't answer. And so I've slowly walked over to him whilst looking at this thing. And he's sat underneath a bivvy. A bivvy is like a half of a tent that you sit under for bad weather and protect you from the wind. And I start banging on his bivvy. I said, Lance, look at this. Now, you got to consider as well, I always watch, whenever I go fishing, I always watch for where the aeroplanes are and where the flight paths are. And they always go backwards and forwards on the same routes. It's like a road, isn't it? They have roads, sky roads. So I'm tapping him, and this was nowhere near any of those, pathways for aeroplanes. And I'm tapping him, tapping the tent. And I went, Lance! And as he said, what? And sort of like came to, I'm like, what? I'm thinking to myself, what the hell? He was just talking to me. And I said, look, and I've still got my hand pointing at where this thing was. And briefly, as he said, what? I've looked at him, and then looked away, and it's gone. And I'm like, oh my God. The frustration was just unreal, because this thing was so big as well and so noticeable. It's like, did it come across, stop time or something, do something with me, then, and put him to sleep or something? It makes you think all these mad things, because how did he not notice it? How did he not hear me when I was calling him, when we were just been talking about these things? It just blew me away. And that one is the most prevalent one to me. It's the one that sticks mainly in my brain.
And it makes me wonder, when he was in almost like a frozen state there, did he experience any loss of time or shift in time or anything, or did you ever discuss that with him?
Don't know. We've never really spoke about it. Never really spoke about it like that. It was just on that day. And I've mentioned to him a couple of times, and he said, yeah, it was a crazy thing. I said, what was crazy is that I saw it and you never, and you were literally in the same place as me. It's like, I think it's like some people are destined not to see it.
Yeah, and by the same token, some people are destined to see things like that.
I think that's what it is.
That was my grandmother's explanation. When I asked her about that little boy that I saw, she said, sometimes you'll see things that are just for you. Sometimes things will be meant for other people, and you happen to see it. Yeah. And she said, other times there's things that you see that you may never know who or why or what. It just is. And that was pretty profound, I thought.
So to finish off these last two, there's only two more little stories now. So I'm in my studio, and I'm in my chill out zone. I've got a little 8 foot by 8 foot chill out zone where I've got a couple of TVs and stuff and my gaming system. And this is when I smoked as well. So I used to pop outside and have a smoke and look at the stars like you do. Because Orion's belt comes right across my house. So, I always look out there, and the moon comes across the same place. Well, this time I've come out of my back door, and I've got my ex-son-in-law out here. And we're outside, and I've looked at the moon, which is dead opposite me as I walk out the door. And there's this little light, and first of all I thought, Venus or whatever, because it's near the moon. But then I realised it's moving. I'm like, well, that's strange. No noise. Now, consider I know the flight paths across my house as well. And when helicopters come across, wow, they're noisy. I mean, they're just really noisy, and it echoes right the way through our estate. And anything that would be up there would echo through the estate, which is a house, housing estate. And I've grabbed my camera, my phone, and I've just taken a little movie of it. I've put it into one of the tracks that I've got on YouTube, a little mini video that I've got called Where Trouble Finds You. And it's briefly in there. It's only a short thing anyway, because it comes from the moon, and I just about got it when it was halfway between the moon and the set of trees that are behind my house. So I got it from halfway and then off when it went behind the trees. But I put that little clip inside that. That's the only piece of footage that issued, because it's the only proper piece of footage I've got apart from the last one. Now, the last piece of footage, same again. I've come out of my back door and I've looked left. For some reason, just looked left and looked above the tree line. And we got trees right behind our house. And as I've looked up, there's a light again. And I'm like, well, that's strange. And again, it's moving. But this time, I'll see which way it's moving. I've ran indoors and I've got my proper video camera. And I've run out to the front of the house. I'm sure I've shown you this video as well, Steve. Haven't I?
Yeah, you did. Yeah, I've seen that. It's an amazing piece of footage.
Right, so I've run out to the front of my house and I'm recording this thing, and it's travelled along and no sound, and your motorcycle comes past really loud, and you can tell that if there was something in that sky, this video camera would have picked it up. I mean, it's a 5.1 sound it's got on it as well. So if it was a drone, you'd have heard the in the air. The air. It was 2:30 in the morning, so it was quiet enough for you to be able to definitely hear that up in the sky.
Yeah, you would have heard the hum of a drone.
Oh, 100%. There's no way that it'd be silent, because it wasn't that high either, really. You couldn't really tell, but you could tell, if you know what I mean. It's a strange one. Again, it's hard to tell the height because it's just an orb. But as it's travelled along, it's gone past a flaring light on the street light. The light's flaring, like it does with the beams of light coming out of it. And as it's gone past one, it drops, and then it comes past another one, and then it drops again, and then just carries on in a straight line. It really does intrigue me. But that was the last one. I've got that on footage. I haven't released it. I don't know whether I really will or not, because I don't want the over attention about it. That's why I just snuck it. I might sneak that piece of footage into another video at some point. Maybe there's only
just
now.
to see what, if anything, people comment about. That's brilliant, I think.
Yeah, well, because it's just, the video footage that I did for Where Trouble Finds You is just a collection of photos and videos from the year before, kind of thing, So just put it all into the video and put it behind one of my tracks. Yeah, that's pretty much me, mate.
Those are some great stories there, Lee. I appreciate those. Just a few questions here before we go. Now, that area that you live in there, is that a hotbed? Is there a lot of sightings of that sort there, or are these?
I don't know, because it's not like I'm tapped into any ufologists or I didn't like. The last thing I thought of was doing a check on airspace and stuff, because I know the Chinooks that come across our house, that come across regularly. I know where the airport is. I know the flight paths of the airplanes, and they don't come across the way this thing came across. It's just in the wrong place. It was just totally in the wrong place.
Yeah.
Again, like I said, I'm very aware of the skies above me, and I'm also aware of what a lantern looks like and what a drone looks like, and even a drone. If it was, say for instance, it was a drug dealer with a drone, dropping off some drugs or something, they wouldn't have a big bright light on it.
Yeah, exactly.
Don't want to be noticed, do they? So they'd have no lights on it. They'd disable the lights.
I had Daryl from Midwest Night Watchers and his wife, Chiro Sounds on a few weeks ago, and they watch the skies regularly. And they have apps that they use. They have one that shows the paths of the satellites. So if they see something, they can look and say, oh, well, it's not the satellite. Yeah. And then they also have another app that shows all the current flight paths of known flights that are in the air, so they can eliminate those. Yeah. So, when you eliminate, what is it, Sherlock Holmes said that when you eliminate
the impossible, or the possible, only the impossible remain.
Yeah, and there you go. So I think that's a very astute way to put it.
Absolutely, yeah.
Sir Arthur Conan Doyle, they're writing as Sherlock Holmes, but he was tapping into some universal wisdom there, I think.
Yeah, absolutely.
Now, I know you mentioned that you're not too far from Stonehenge.
I'm very close. I'm
that whole area.
12 miles.
I've been there years and years and years ago, but there is a mystical quality to it.
Yeah, I mean, the whole area, don't forget, I live on ancient land. I mean, and Southampton itself is surrounded by a wall that used to, the water used to come right up to our town wall, and we've basically, where all the dock land is all reclaimed, and it's all, concrete and pile driven, So
there's no telling what's under that water.
Well,
likewise, some of the places that I have heard of there, and forgive my lack of English geography knowledge, but are you close to Rendlesham or any of those places where they've had anomalous?
Rendlesham Forest is a little bit more inland kind of thing.
That's one of the most amazing UFO stories I've ever heard. Multiple witnesses and people.
Yeah, Rendlesham Forest is our most
were
famous story, isn't
RAF
it?
officers and things that knew that it wasn't a plane or something like that.
And they knew it wasn't that lighthouse. I mean, because the first thing
that's how they
that
tried
was
to explain it
debunked,
away. But
it wasn't a flashing light they saw. It was a solid red light. I mean, with a beam coming out of it. I mean, coming down to the ground, which a lighthouse, as you know, sweeps across. It doesn't. It's to alert, as obviously, ships to the rocky shoreline. So, I don't think it's got anything to do with that. I don't think these people were stupid enough to mistake. I think it's insulting to the people saying that you've mistaken a lighthouse.
Like with Roswell, it was a weather balloon. No.
Yeah, I mean, it's just insulting. It's just all insulting.
It is.
It's insulting to people's integrity as well. Because, I mean, as well, what have you got to gain? I mean, I've got literally nothing to gain by telling you my little stories. There's nothing. I don't need anything from it, and that's why I haven't released it and gone. Look at my wow footage. Look, everybody.
Well,
look.
I do find it
me.
fascinating to hear just ordinary people's stories from everyday walks of life that have had a brush with the unusual in some form or fashion.
Yeah,
and I really enjoyed those stories. Now, the way you and I met, you have a YouTube channel where you compose music. You're a multi-instrumentalist, singer, songwriter, composer. And what did we figure the other night that you've written about, 35 songs or something like that for just a couple of my YouTube channels.
Yeah,
and in fact, the bumper music that you hear at the beginning and the end of this show, that's one of your compositions. So
yeah, and it's
tell us about your YouTube channel and what people can expect over there.
Well, I'm live 3 nights a week on First Floor Audio. It's 1ST Floor Audio, by the way, not First.
I'll put a link in the show notes.
That'd be great. Yeah, cool. Thanks very much. And I'm live 3 nights a week. On a Tuesday, I do Night Writer, where I write an original piece just to show the process. It's not about it being the next #1 track or anything. It's just just to show literally the process of how a song is put together. And then on a Thursday, it's Radio 1FA. Obviously, Radio 1FA means First Floor Audio. Radio 1FA, back-to-back original tracks. All tracks that are there were either produced in the studio, written by me, and and produced by me, clearly.
And you've got quite a catalog there. It's impressive. You've got, over 200 tracks, plus, 80-something instrumentals, plus all the work you've done for other YouTube channels.
There's just a lot of music. There's some as well. I'm just now, what I'm doing on a Tuesday night at the moment is, rather than writing tracks, I'm going through the old shows and exporting all the tracks into a playlist so that then I can upload them to YouTube as Night Writer tracks. Obviously tracks that have been written on Night Writer, like I did with your albums in front of you.
Yeah, and I had fun over there this past Tuesday night. You were playing those tracks and letting the audience name them. I was on camera, so I didn't get to play along.
Yeah.
But you got some great names, and one of the ones that Nicole suggested that you loved was 1985, and that's just a great title for that track. That is.
Yeah, it seems to work because it was reminiscent. It reminded people of what was the film?
The Breakfast Club.
Breakfast Club. Yeah, the Breakfast Club. So yeah, I think it's just the 80s influence that I'm.
Yeah, there's a definite 80s influence in your music, which I love. To me, totally. The 80s was the best decade for music.
Well, it's the most eclectic era of all time.
You had pop music, you had the synthwave, you had
and it wasn't just that. It was
that. Of course, they'd started in the 70s, but you had their influence. Gary Newman, who literally the man was making 80s music in the 70s. If you listen to some of those early albums,
it wasn't just the music though. It was, we had everything in the 80s. We had the beginning of skateboarding, rollerblading, BMXing, mountain biking, computers, and gaming. It all happened
arcades
around them times. Yeah,
television was good. The movies were iconic.
Yeah,
I've often said if I could go back and live any decade over, it would be
the 80s. Yeah, same, absolutely the same.
I graduated high school in '81, and then college in the later '80s, and
I left school in '84. So yeah. Same era, mate. We're in the same
and
era.
love it. It's just and Nicole was born in 1985, so
Wow, that's crazy.
even a
That's
better
crazy.
reason to name it that track, or to name that
So,
track that.
so I've mentioned the two shows, which is Night Writer on Tuesdays,
Yeah, tell the
and
audience about
Radio One
the
FA.
Saturday night shows that you do.
Well, Saturday night is cover version night, so it's just a musical entertainment night kind of thing where I sing covers from the 80s and early 90s, and some 70s and 60s, depends what it is. I do a little bit of Elvis here and there.
Yeah,
But,
it's a nice mix. And to me, the most fascinating thing is those aren't karaoke tracks.
No.
You've
I write them all.
recreated those tracks.
I
You
recreate
built them
them.
from scratch.
Yep.
So into your vocal range and your what's the word I'm looking for there? Your range or
Into my key and
your key.
into my
There you go.
range.
That's what I was looking
Yeah,
for.
and I do all the backing harmonies, everything basically. Yeah,
It's amazing. And
and I'm self-taught. That's
oh
the
yeah,
other thing.
just you're a savant. You're a true savant, a musical genius, and I'm not
That's
just
nice
blowing
of you to
smoke there. I really feel that way. You're the most musically talented person I've ever met by far, and people would be remiss and if they didn't come and check out your show.
It's not nice of you to say, Steve. Thanks, mate. But the only reason I got into YouTube, as I'm sure you're aware of this story many times now, but I wrote for a channel called Alien Girl 111 due to a friend that used to frequent her show, who heard who heard the host of the show say, "I'd really love some authentic music that's about my show," kind of thing. So this friend's came to me and said, "You write music, don't you?" And I said, "Yeah." And she said, "Well, I've got this. There's this channel I go to called Alien Girl 111, and she's looking for music." So I went away and I didn't even speak to Amy, who's the host of the show. I just wrote 19 tracks, and then I delivered them to her. And to her
Amazing.
astonishment, one of them being an actual intro track, which she uses. And there's about 4 or 5 tracks, maybe 6 tracks out of the 19 tracks that I gave her that she actually uses. But, which is lovely. She's been using them now for about 2.5 years, because that's how long I've had a YouTube channel. Now, the only reason I started the YouTube channel is because I went on her show and spoke about this, and it was a very bad show. I was very bad, and it was my first time. And I was on a phone as well, and Google kept burning out my phone, basically, and wearing out the battery and heating it up. So it didn't go very well. Still, people were asking me afterwards, about how I make the music. So I started doing a YouTube channel where I just literally was showing how I wrote music, and then it progressed from there. And eventually,
it's amazing, especially on the
different
Night
shows.
Rider, just to watch the process there, to start with a blank slate, literally, and
Yeah.
build it up instrument by instrument and everything, and then the finished product. And to do that within the space of an hour or two, it's just, I'm blown away.
Yeah, I mean, the fastest I've written one is 20 minutes.
20 minutes, wow.
Yeah, and the longest has been, I think, 4 hours.
Yeah. And there's some real earworms over there. There's some of your music that just sticks in my head. When I do my live streams on Among the Missing, I've been opening up with A Calm Before the Storm, but with
Yeah.
your kind permission. You didn't write that one for me, but that's one of my favorite tracks to use. And another thing that I love, you pick people out of the audience, you put their name on the screen, and then make up a song about them on the spot.
Yeah.
Catheta Cat Gray, who's
Well, I
been
made
on
an
this
actual
show.
record out of that one.
Yeah, you made I think a top 10 hit out of that one.
I still haven't released it yet because I really want to do a video, right? But I haven't got the finances to upgrade, so I can't do videos yet. And one day I'll be able to, and I'll be able to actually release it as a thing, because I think it deserves
It'll be
an
amazing.
actual,
It is
an actual video.
earworm. I couldn't tell you the number of times. Same with my wife, Nicole. We've woken up in the morning with parts of that song in our head, and then little bits and pieces of several of these
Yeah,
songs.
like Steve Stockton is a hell of a guy.
Yeah, that one you just wrote on the spot, and Nicole loves that, and some of the other people in the chat will now actually request that one. And again, that was just a little ditty, little jingle, if you will, that you made up, and it works.
Bit of comedy amongst my seriousness, because I'm a very serious musician, but I like to have fun, so I don't take myself
It is
too
a good
seriously.
time over there. And another one that's been just etched into my brain is Second Chances. And I can't wait for
Second
Thursday night over
chances
there,
in brackets day by day.
day by day. Yeah, I want to hear that one. There's just one bit of that. I mean, the whole thing is good, but there's one bit of that that's just stuck on repeat in my head. So I'm looking forward to hearing you play that one again.
Yeah,
But
well,
Lee, any parting words for our audience here?
no, just keep your eyes out. Keep your mind open. Keep your eyes open.
There you
You
go.
know,
Never know
and
what you
and
might
and
say.
listen to music. It's we all love
It's a
music, but
universal language, and it
it
speaks to the
really is.
heart and the brain and the emotions
And
at the same time. But
the only
again,
time that matters is now,
there
as
you go.
there's only now.
Another Lee Hito. That's what he closes his show out with. Another amazing piece of music. There's just so many over there that are, to me, iconic. Since I've been coming there probably a little over a year now, or close to a year, and
Yeah.
I've tried to turn so many people in my audience onto it, and a lot of people stick around and like it. It's an amazing thing. Lee, I want to thank you for taking the time out and being with us here tonight on Everything Out There. And again, I'll put a link to your channel in the show notes. And we appreciate you. We'll have to have you back sometime.
Thanks for having me again, Steve. It's always a pleasure, mate, talking to you.
My pleasure. Thanks, Lee.
Thank you.
And joining me tonight on the phone, one of my longtime listeners, an intuitive and empathic, Joanne. Joanne, come on in. How you doing tonight?
I'm doing wonderful. Thanks, Steve, and thanks for having me on your show.
Oh,
Appreciate it.
absolutely. I've been talking to you a little bit, and Nicole's been talking to you. You turned out to be one of her best friends, if not her best friend, other than me, of course. And she says you've got some interesting stories you'd like to share.
I do, and I'm, so glad to be able to share this tonight. I guess my whole thing has started when, as far as back as I can remember, I grew up in a very active house. I guess people would call it a haunted house. And actually, I'm living back here right now. So I'm living in the house I grew up in. And really interesting, I grew up in a family who was really open and believed in what we now call the paranormal and supernatural. And so it wasn't unusual for us to be at big family gatherings. I, grew up in a really big Italian Catholic family. And so we would often have big dinners or parties or get-togethers for no reason whatsoever except just to get together as family. And again, it wasn't unusual for us to talk about like prophetic dreams or dead Uncle so-and-so came to visit me last night and we saw him. And so that was all a part of kind of the conversation. And yeah, and how are you doing? Oh, and the lasagna is great tonight. So it was kind of an interesting way of growing up. So I was pretty open to the fact that this stuff was real and it happened. And so yeah, I'm really grateful for that. And I remember one of the first memories I have growing up in this house, and one of the experiences actually was a little bit frightening, was I think I was like around 4, give or take a year or two. I was in, I believe it was my brother's bedroom at the time. For some reason, I decided to go and lay down in his bed, which was right next to this huge window that I have in that particular bedroom. I remember just kind of laying there and falling asleep, and something woke me up, like just startled me and woke me up out of the clear blue. And I remember looking at the window and the windowsill. And again, I live in a really old house. It's about, I don't know, 120 or some years old. So I have these big old windows with these big wooden windowsills, and the window wasn't open, and I just looked, and there was this cat, and we did not have cats growing up. We always had dogs. And I looked, and I remember blinking my eyes, and this cat was looking at me and growling. And I remember its eyes looked really weird to me. And when I look back now, like they were almost glowing. And I remember the cat growling and like pawing at me and showing me its teeth, and then suddenly like grabbing for me with its paws. And I remember screaming. And I remember my mom and I believe one of my sisters ran in to the bedroom wondering what the heck was going on. And I believe they saw the cat too, and it just suddenly disappeared, like just almost like evaporated. And that's one of my very first memories of paranormal experience growing up. So that was really kind of interesting. Growing up in this house, there was so much activity. I grew up in a big family. I have 4 siblings, and
Yeah.
that's my parents, right? And so,
And that
you
introduction at an early age, that 4 years old, that seems to be a common factor with a lot of
correct,
people I talk. That's when I had my first experiences around 4. Nicole had hers around that same age. A lot of people I've talked to, that seems to be just a special age for when these brushes with the paranormal start revealing themselves to you. And your family, who you described, that sounds like my maternal grandmother and her family, my mom's side of the family. They had a large family, 10 kids, 9 boys, and my mom, plus their grandmother lived with them. And they had a dairy farm, so there's a lot of farm hands and stuff in and out. But again, their normal was what other people considered the paranormal. My grandmother was a self-professed witch. She told fortunes, she read tea leaves, coffee grounds, animal entrails, practiced phrenology, made charms, and knew all about good luck and bad luck and all kinds of legends and stuff. And, they regularly held seances and table tapping or
yep,
table tipping sessions and used a Ouija board and stuff. And again, my mom growing up, she was born in 1927. That was just their normal. They didn't know any better. They were a part of the spiritualism movement from around the turn of the last century. And the way they got into that, they had loved ones that went off and never came back from the First World War.
right.
And they were trying to get in contact with them. And that's what led them into all that. But it's an unusual and very interesting way to grow up. Like I said, for your normal to be what other people consider the paranormal or the supernatural.
It's true. It's true. And, it wasn't until I kind of got out in the quote unquote real world that I learned that, like, not everybody grows up that way. Right. And not everybody's open to it. And that shocked me, honestly, because I was like, how can you not believe in that? You had your mom's side. It was my dad's side that was really open to it. And my grandmother was the same way, my dad's mom. And she, again, I grew up in a very Catholic family, but it was really interesting, she had this huge altar with all the saints and different things and candles, and yet, I remember she would be doing these interesting chants, right? And I just thought, maybe she was just praying in Italian, but, like, I know intuitively, even growing up, I knew she was doing other things. And she used to read playing cards. She had learned, she said, way back when she was younger, that she learned from a self-professed gypsy herself, how to read cards. And so she did that for a long time. And in fact, she kind of told some of us how to do it. But she got away from that because it was quite interesting. She said that she was reading for a young woman who wanted to know, a little bit more about her life. She was getting married and things. And my grandmother said that she saw in the cards that she wasn't going to get married and her fiance wasn't going to be around. And she didn't know how to tell her that. And my grandmother didn't really want to know about that kind of information, but it came through very strongly. And so when my grandmother found out that that had actually happened, that her fiance had, in fact, I think was killed in some kind of accident, unfortunately, and she had stopped reading and doing all of that. But that doesn't stop, uh, you know, us getting intuitive information and all of this. So, even though she stopped reading the cards, I remember her looking in coffee grounds, right, and being able to see certain things in coffee grounds. She was a very special lady, and had the honor of being able to be around her for a while and learn some really interesting stuff. In fact, I think she was one of the people, and I think I remember hearing this on one of your shows, I think, Steve, where she said all of us were born with the veil over our face, me and my siblings, right? And that meant that you were a
Yeah,
bit
you had the
magical,
second
intuitive.
sight, or you were
Correct.
gifted or whatever. Yeah, in my family, that side, um, all those children, I was the only grandchild that was born with a veil or in call or whatever you want to call it.
Right.
And to my grandmother's superstitious eyes, that marked me as the special child. And she would take me alone to get me in her quilting room where it was otherwise forbidden and try to teach me things. But I was scared of her. I mean, she looked like Hansel and Gretel style witch. I was afraid of her
Right.
when I was real small, and she passed away when I was 13. But I wish I'd had at least another 13 years with her. And just you're almost describing my childhood. She read Coffee Grounds, and she had a similar experience where she had told a girl how to perform this ritual to see who her future betrothed would look like, and had to go out at a full moon and stand a certain way by a creek, and then take a hand mirror and look over your shoulder, and you would allegedly see the face of the person you were going to marry her. Well, this girl did it, and instead of somebody's face, she saw a pine box coffin, and
Wow.
then she later passed away tragically. And that one shook my grandmother up. And but she would always say, don't ask questions that you don't want to know the answer to, because you
That's
can
right.
find out things that you don't want to know. And that I was always cautioned, with the Ouija board and things like that, because again, that was just a staple. My mom bought one for me when I was 6 years old, but she also had the gypsy witch part in it. She was a gypsy witch. Now that was different than nowadays they'd call her a granny witch or a kitchen witch, but she liked the gypsy part. Now that part, I don't know where that came from. Maybe there was some old country in there somewhere that they came from, but she was born in the Cades Cove area of the Smokies, so that's not
Okay.
there's not any gypsies around there that I'm aware of. But it was an interesting way to grow up and to be around all that, and just again, that was I didn't know any better. I didn't know that everybody's grandma didn't tell fortunes, and
Right.
the same with the cards. She would not touch a tarot deck. There was something about those she didn't like. She used
Exactly.
regular pairing cards, but she had her own little drawings that she had added to them. If you're familiar with a Lenormand deck, they're kind of like that.
Okay.
And but she'd made her own, and I don't know where I'm still got or still had her original deck. I think I lost it in one of my moves, but um, I'd like to have it now. But just again, just fascinating, and to hear you telling that, it's kind of my own childhood just through a different lens.
It's really interesting, like, when you start talking to people, right, who had similar, who's had similar experiences, like, it's kind of this thing where you're like, "Okay, I'm not the only one," and that's interesting. Your, parents did this or your grandmother did this in a little different way, and, it's to me, it's kinda comforting as well, right, because it's like, "Okay, like, I'm not the only one, that, kinda grew up in this, um" paranormal, quote unquote, kind of um, space and had these experiences, which is really kind of cool. I think that like all the experiences that I've had throughout my life, were part of learning. And my grandmother, she passed away. I think I don't know, in my late teens, maybe, or maybe my 20s. And I wish I had a little more time to kind of pick her brain and talk to her, and kind of get more of her experiences and things that she learned and along the journey. Because you know, knowledge is power, right? And she had a lot of wisdom to give. And so it's kind of some of that was lost when she passed over. And I remember her, even coming over to our house here. And, she would just look around, and I knew she saw things. And sometimes I think she was just silent, because I don't know if she didn't want to scare us, or she wasn't really sure what to say, or she just knew that maybe it wasn't something to share. So, um, I remember just kind of studying her throughout, my lifetime, even as a little kid, just kind of studying her and and just seeing like, what is she seeing? What is she noticing? What's going on? And just grateful that I had that time with her for sure.
Yeah, the interpretation of signs and omens, that was one that
Yes.
fascinates me now, that scared the dickens out of me when I was a little kid, but she knew what to watch for and then how to interpret it. And Lord help you if you put a hat on the bed, or if a chicken,
Yes.
not a rooster, but if a chicken crowed, you had to find out which chicken it was, and then that was the next day's dinner. Now, I don't know how they all the time decided which chicken was the one that crowed, but if they could figure out which one it was a goner
Yeah.
because that was bad luck. You didn't sing at the table. You didn't whistle after dark because you could call
Yes.
things to you. You know,
Absolutely.
just a lot of these Appalachian superstitions, these Southern Appalachians, and it fascinates me now. And like I said, I wish I had more time with her. And that was where I got the idea to start writing these stories down was at her funeral. I was looking at her there in her coffin and just how still and quiet she was because she was always on the move, always on the go. And here she was in the quiet stillness of
Mhm.
death. And I just had an epiphany, that I've got to tell these stories because otherwise they vanish in the midst of time with the people that
Yeah.
told them. And my first book, Strange Things in the Woods, I'd say about 95% of the people that those stories came from have passed on now. And it's a legacy. They live on through their stories through me.
Yes.
And I like assuming that mantle, and I'm working on a book about her. That one's a little slow. None of my cousins or aunts and uncles are interested in the least in any of that stuff. And they don't even the stuff that I remember. A lot of them have no knowledge of it or don't remember it. Now they do remember the seances and the table tappings and stuff, but most of them have gone on. Out of those 10 children, I think only one is still alive now. So,
Okay.
but it's been a long time. She was born in, I think, 1895 and then
Okay.
started having kids in the early 1900s, or the late 1900s. She got married when she was 13 to a man in his 20s. But that was just the way they did things back
That's
then. And
right.
they dairy farmed and they did truck farming, raise corn and tobacco and things like that. And the more kids you had, the more free farm hands you had,
Right.
that sort of thing. So
Right, that's right. My grandmother was very similar. I think she got married. I don't know. She might have been 16, and I think my grandfather was in his late 20s, maybe early 30s. And again, that's exactly what you did back then. And they had 9 children, and we lived always lived outside of Chicago, and so, but, even so, they had a plot of land where they, grew their own veggies and did their own things, and so I think that was just the times, back then, and I think my gram learned, a lot of this stuff from living in Italy, for a while, and honestly, I think from her, side of the family, her father, and, 'cause her mom, I think, died in very young. My grandma was really young, I don't know, like 2, 3, 4, maybe, and so, I think that this was just passed down from generation to generation, and it continues. My aunts and uncles were, believed in this. It's really interesting that, like, some of my cousins, a lot of my cousins, they don't anymore. They just kind of, poo-poo it, and so it's me and you know, couple of my siblings and a few of my just a couple of my cousins who still kind of believe in what I call this kind of amazing wisdom magic that we grew up in. And so we kind of carry on that legacy in different ways. In fact, I've, been inspired myself, Steve, and I've started on and off to write a book, kind of what I call like my own cookbook. And it is like sharing the recipes um, that I grew up with, um, not just from my grandmother, but, from my aunts and uncles on both sides. And, um, and also kind of like the spiritual recipes and the little antidotes that I learned along the way from my grandmother and, even wise people that I've met on my journey throughout the way, and just to be able to sprinkle some of that amazing magic um, into that book, so and to be able to share that with people. So it's kind of like a legacy of me growing up, and you know and being able to have that live on, and it's really special to me as well.
Now that sounds similar to the book that I'm writing about my grandmother, and I even had the idea to include some of her recipes in there. But
Awesome.
I've tried and tried and tried, and my mom did a lot of those recipes because being the only girl, she helped cook. I mean, my grandmother had two cook stoves. You know that she literally had an army of farmhands to feed and children, and my mom helped her cook. And just being around that, 7 of those 9 brothers became restaurateurs. Some of them had more than one restaurant, and so that's where I get my cooking ability. Nicole
Okay.
loves my cooking, but the some of those recipes I can follow them to the letter, but it just I can't get it to taste like my grandmother and my
Yeah,
mother's cooking did. And I think it's that love, a mother's love or grandmother's love,
yes,
that's the ingredient that it's missing.
I
And it still
agree.
tastes good, but it just don't taste like it used to me.
It's not the same. We say that too. My dad was a great cook as well as my mom, and they both passed away very long time ago. And My dad used to make these noodles. They were just simple butter noodles with maybe some garlic and, parm cheese in it, and whatever, a little salt and pepper. And he would always say, Joanne, I made this with love. And to this day, me and my sisters are like, we cannot make those noodles like dad did. They just don't taste the same. And I
Yep,
think,
yep.
I think it was that. I think it was that little bit of extra oomph and intention and love that they put into it
Yeah,
that
it gets into the cooking.
it does. It really does. And those are the things I want to be able to share, um, with other people, and kind of be able to uplift that, right? And
Yeah.
it's just so special.
Once you get it finished, if you're looking for an editor or publisher, talk to us off the air. We can help you out.
Would love that. Would love that. Thank you.
I just published my 19th book, 20 if you count the one that I co-wrote with Cisco. And we're starting our own publishing imprint. And I said, we need to talk.
Okay. I absolutely we'll do that off the air. I would love to do that. Thank you.
Awesome.
Um, so I have a couple more things that I actually was thinking of when I was thinking about, all this growing up and all the things that I've experienced throughout my lifetime. It's kind of thinking of stories um, that I thought would be interesting to share, and yeah, and so I go back to my house, right? I mean, I've had experience outside of my house, but thought maybe I'd share these other two if that's okay.
Oh,
Um,
absolutely. Anything you'd care to share, I'd love to hear it. And I'm sure my audience feels the same way.
okay, wonderful. Um, So I live in a traditional in the Midwest, what we call a two flat. And I remember, you know, my sister had moved upstairs. One of my older sisters moved upstairs, and for some reason I don't remember. Sometimes I would just go up and, have like sleepovers when I was younger with her, and and I remember going upstairs. And honestly, the upstairs is much more haunted than the downstairs. Um, and which is where I live, the downstairs flat. And I remember going upstairs and we were watching movies or we were doing something, and I remember falling asleep on her couch, and she fell asleep on her other couch. And I remember all of a sudden, like again, I was awakened, and the air got really I static. That's the only way I can say it. It was static, and everything got really, really cold, and we were in the middle of, like, a hot summer, so it wasn't a winter here in the Midwest, and, so, so cold, and I remember it was so cold, I actually took one of the blankets off of her couch and put it on, and I heard, from the back of the house, which is where kind of like our kitchen area is, um, walking, heavy steps, walking. And I knew it wasn't her because I heard her breathing next to me, like in the couch next to me. And there was nobody else there. And I remember those steps coming slowly. And I wasn't looking. I had my back toward it coming. And the closer those steps were coming to me, toward me, the colder it was getting, to the point where I was shivering. And I will tell you, like, I'm open to all of this. And because, like, I've had all these experiences, I don't want to say things don't scare me, but like, I'm not easily shocked or afraid. And
I
I
know
was
the feeling. It takes a lot to scare me, but I have been scared on at
correct.
least 3 occasions that I can think of, but
And those
you
things
get
are
used to
right.
it. Yeah.
You get used to it. And those things like stand out in your mind when like fear hits. And I remember I was laying there and I was like, and I just started praying and I could feel that whoever it was coming closer, I could hear them. And I got colder and colder to the point where I literally put the blanket over my head and it got right next to me. I heard the footsteps stop right next to me. And I just kept praying and I said, please go away. Just please go away. Please go away. I'm scared. Please go away. And I heard it turn and walk away. And um and then there was nothing and it got warm again. And I did not move. I think I was so exhausted and so scared that I just passed out. I just fell asleep. And that was one of the most frightening, even though it may not sound frightening, it was one of the most frightening experiences. I think it was because of like everything that I was feeling, how cold it got. um it was like a visceral experience. That's how I can put it. It was visceral. And and that particular experience stands out in my mind, and it was many, many years ago that happened. Um, and there was another one when I was, again, living in this house and I was older. This happened, I don't know, not too long ago. And my sister had left. She, again, living upstairs still. She had left to go on vacation, and it was just me, and nobody else was there, um, living upstairs. And I remember sitting here, and I was with my my boy cat, and I don't know, I was watching a movie or something, and I heard somebody walking upstairs. Now, the way that, our house is, there's no way anybody could get upstairs. There's no way anybody can get inside the house without me knowing it. Not from the back, front, anything. There's just no way. And so I was like, okay, what's this? And I heard again from the same place, walking from the middle of the hallway, by the kitchen area that I had that one experience, the previous experience, walking again slowly, heavy footsteps. I heard them come to the door, her door. I heard the door open. I heard them come down the stairs. Um, and even my boy cat heard it, went to my door. I said, "Oh, we're not opening that door." I heard them come down to the last landing. There's two big landings. She has many stairs to go upstairs. And stood there and I said, "You're not allowed to come here. You're not allowed to come into my house." And it went silent. And then all of a sudden I heard steps going back upstairs, the door close. And then I heard the steps going back to the back of the house again. And I was like, okay, I was like, okay. And again, I wasn't frightened. It was just an interesting experience. And interesting enough, my sister, who I say lives upstairs, she's more of the skeptic, so she doesn't really believe in a whole lot of this. So for me to tell her, she's like, yeah, 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 you sure? Like, and I'm like, she's like, it's an old house. I said, I think I know the difference between an old house creaking and like footsteps walking, and somebody opening your door. But again, kind of stood out. It was a story that stood out for me, and a really interesting experience. And I said, maybe I need to cleanse the house again. So that made me kind of get up and say, okay, maybe it's time to cleanse the house again. I don't think they are, um, you know, I don't think they mean any harm. These spirits, I think they're just around, and that's a little bit of comforting as well. Um, but I think they're just around. They just are making themselves known, honestly. And and I said that's fine. And whoever they are, uh, as long as they're peaceful, so be it.
Yeah,
So
and I think there's some like that that don't have a particular purpose. They just come and visit.
correct.
They're not there with any unfinished business or any of the usual things that you hear. And I love, yeah, like you were saying that people, it's an old house, the floor is creaking things, but like I can tell the difference when it's somebody walking around,
Correct.
and that, being said, I've heard them on the roof, I've heard them in the attic, I've heard them downstairs,
Yes.
different places that I've lived, and I can tell the difference. And one house I lived in Portland that was well over 100 years old at the time. I would hear what sounded like somebody dropped a handful of change in the living room, and that's the original fir flooring in there, the old Victorian cottage. And you would hear, the coins rolling around on the floor. There's nothing there. Just things like that, that there's no rational explanation for.
Correct.
But
Correct.
just a visitation, just a shadow, a shade of something of times gone by.
Correct. Just to, sometimes I think it's just like I'm saying hello, right? I'm just coming to say hello,
And
or
it's not always an apparition or even a noise. It can be a phantom smell or things
correct.
like that. I've smelled fresh flowers in the middle of the winter or things like that, or the pipe tobacco or some sort of
Yes,
tobacco and things like that. And again, I don't know who it is or why they chose to visit or if there's a reason for their visit, but I think we are visited.
I agree. I agree. And I think it's an honor, to me, it's an honor when they come visit. And, sometimes I just say, okay, thank you. If you need, if you need anything, let me know, but thank you. Thank you for being here and thank you for visiting. And My grandma always taught me that too. She used to say to me, Joanne, you need to be more afraid of the living than the dead. And
Absolutely.
yeah, and so I was like, "Okay, Graham." And she's like, "Remember that." And so, that's always kind of stuck in my head.
Yeah, my granny would say the dead can't hurt you, but they can cause you to hurt yourself if you get too torn up and try to run away and fall down the stairs or something. And
Yes,
a lot of wisdom in that. Sometimes if you just accept it or it is what it is and don't let it scare you, unless it is. Now there are things I think that are sent to frighten you
I
for
agree.
whatever reason, but other things it's just like a friendly hello. I've had feathers floating in the house before. I
Yes,
found a coin in a room where there was should be no coins in there. Just right in the middle of the floor or in the middle of the bed or something like that. Just somebody's little token of saying, "Hey, I came by to visit and you weren't here, so I left you this."
absolutely. And like, uh, again, I think that's comforting. To me, that's comforting. And again, grateful that I'm aware of these messages, right, that are coming through, or these spirits that are coming through. I've had similar, as you said, like similar, smelling things when it's obviously not there, or like I've smelled my dad's cigarettes after he crossed over, or his cigar smoke. Um and we all did one time. We were talking about him. There's a bunch of us that were together, and we were talking about him, and I think it was either the anniversary of his crossing over, or his birthday, I don't remember. And we were laughing about something, and somebody said, mentioned his name. And we said, yeah. And then all of a sudden, like, we smelt cigar smoke. And everybody was looking at each other. Nobody was smoking, and we all looked at each other and we said, "Oh yeah, here's Dad." And we think he just came to say, "I know you're talking about me. Hello." And we just started laughing, and I think that's really cool. Another time I was kind of thinking of somebody, and doing my prayers and mantras that I do daily, and all of a sudden I looked again with my same cat, and I was like, "What are you looking at?" And he just looked at me, and here's this butterfly, literally a beautiful butterfly, um, flying in my house. How it got in, I don't know. Again, no doors or windows were open. And to me, I just thought that was an amazing sign. And, I captured it, thanked it, and, put it outside. And, again, those amazing little signs, to me mean so much. It just means that there's more out there
Yeah.
than just the everyday mundane.
And one of the things I'll try to do is correlate it with the date. I'll look at what's today and then
Right.
try to see if there's, this is the anniversary of so and so's passing, or this thing or that thing happened on this date X number of years ago. Sometimes it is, and then other times there's no correlation that I can find. That doesn't mean there's not one, but just that
Right.
I can't think of it.
Right. I'm the same way. I'll look at the date, or I'll be like, okay, Joanne, what were you just doing? What were you thinking? Right. And is there a correlation with that? And so I do the exact same thing. And if I can't figure out, I just go, okay, so shall it be. There's obviously a reason. And I kind of look at it as it was just a gift, from
Yeah.
spirit. And I'm grateful for sure. Grateful for
Yeah.
sure.
And I love those visitations. And again, I don't have as many as I used to. I think a lot of that was where I grew up and the way that I grew up and things. But every house I've ever lived in was haunted to some degree.
Yeah.
And much later in life, I came to realize that it wasn't the houses so much; it was me that
Right.
was haunted, because I've lived places where nobody had ever experienced anything until I got there, and then I saw and heard all kinds of things. And I don't know. In some cases, I think they were just in denial of it, or that it manifested more when I was there. But I think that was because the other side knows that I'm open to it and I can hear it or see it or feel it or experience it.
I agree. I think, to me, Steve, it's like this stuff is happening all around us anyhow. And it's just, are we silent enough and open enough to experience it? And so, some people are and some people aren't, right? Because and I think like those who are, like no matter where you are, like those things are, continuing to happen. I remember, a couple of my friends and we decided to, just get away for the weekend. And so I found this really cute little place um, up in Michigan. And so we said, you know what, we're going to go up there for a long weekend and just chill. It had great reviews, and it was this little cottage house, and it was just, great. And so we went there, and I said, okay, wonderful. And yeah, the place was haunted, and my friends are like, "I think it's you, Joanne." And, I I refused to stay in the one bedroom, and I said, "All right, I'll sleep on the couch." And they're like, "We'll switch with you." So I stayed in the other bedroom, and, in the middle of the night, I saw this gentleman come out of their bedroom, walk toward my bedroom, and right outside my bedroom, there was a built-in um, uh, bookshelf, and there was all these books on there. And I saw him perusing the books, and he went to go take the book, and I was like, "Oh, maybe this is like on a loop." And And then he looked at me and I said, "Oh, this isn't on a loop." I said, "Hello, nice to see you." And he just nodded and smiled at me. And he put the book back and walked back to their bedroom. And, I just found that really interesting. And,
Now, I have a
kind of,
question there. Let me stop you for a moment.
yes,
What was the book that they pulled out and put back?
it was about JFK.
And did you find anything in the book, maybe some ephemera or even money or something that somebody had put in the book that you needed to find?
I did not, but I will tell you that book had a very interesting feel, and I didn't even tell them about, when I told my friends about it, and I didn't tell them which book, and my friend went to the bookshelf and, he said, "Is it this book?" And he picked out the book, and I said, "It is." I said, "How do
Yeah.
you know?" He's like,
I
"It
just I
just
knew there
looks
was a
like the
reason I
book."
needed to ask you about the
Yeah.
book.
Yeah, right on, Steve. It had a different feel, and you could tell it was worn, like it was there for a long
Yeah,
time.
and I've heard a similar story. It wasn't anybody in my family, but they kept seeing an apparition go into a bookshelf and look at a particular book. Finally, they got the book and looked in it, and they found a deed to some property
Oh,
somewhere that was in their family. And after that, they didn't get any more visitation. So somebody was trying to let them know, hey, there's something in here that you need to see or that you need to take care of or pay attention to. So there are helpful ghosts like that.
there are. I think he was I think he was just there, like, I think that was his maybe daily going back and forth. I don't know. It was just really, and he did it every night that I was there. Uh, he appeared. Same book, looked at me, nodded at me, acknowledged me. I acknowledged him and went back. And excuse me. And I thought that was really interesting. Again, very benevolent. Did not, I didn't get, creepy feeling. I wasn't fearful. Um, I just was like, we're in his house. That's how I felt. We're visiting his house. And I said to him, thank you. Thank you for
Yeah.
allowing us
And
here.
I've been in places like that where I felt like a visitor or an intruder or
Right.
sometimes just an object. I mean, it's a type of psychometry, I suppose. But I was in an antique store in Portland, Oregon one time, and they had one little area set up like an old kitchen, but all the utensils and implements, cooking stuff were for sale. And I picked up an old egg beater, one of the old metal ones with a wooden handle. And when I picked it up, I just had this jarring vision in my head of an old lady, and she was just shocked and mad. It's like, "What are you doing? Why are you here? Why are you touching my egg beater? Put that down." And I dropped it immediately, and just that little insight that I had, that little flash, went away. But I get that sometimes, not usually that strong, but just from handling an object. I think you can imbue parts of you or your personality in inanimate things like that, and people that are open
Absolutely.
to it can pick up on it. But I didn't want that egg beater after that.
You can have your egg beater. I agree. I agree with that.
Rocking chairs are another. I've had a story. I'm doing listener stories now, Midnight Mailbox on the main channel on YouTube, and I had somebody send in a story that they'd gotten about a rocking chair that they'd bought at the thrift store. And as soon as they got it in their house, Joanne, it was just stuff started happening. They would hear
Yeah.
things. They would see the rocker just, I mean, really going at it. And she got fed up and took it back to the thrift store and said, "Here, I don't want my money back, but you can keep the rocking chair." And the lady that owned the little thrift store said, "Yeah, the lady that used to belong to, it didn't elaborate in the story that I received, but that she uh, left this plane in some sort of tragic,
Okay.
creepy ending." And I think a lot of times, personal things like that, it absorbs your energy or something, and it's
You're
not
right.
happy because that was, excuse me, part of the haunting. Well, she started hearing whispers and voices, and one of the things that she was hearing was like, "Why is this here? This isn't yours. It doesn't belong here."
Right.
Things like that. And I think people, if they have favorite things, you can create an attachment to that carries on long after you're gone.
I agree. I agree. I call it like little droplets of your energy that like absorb into the object, and I'm a total believer in that for sure. I think that happens a lot more than we know. It's interesting, like part of what I do um, for a living uh, is um, is going in and helping to bless and clear like houses or businesses or lands. And one of my friends, a very close friend of mine, she lives in a very haunted house. Honestly, she lives on a haunted in a haunted neighborhood, I should say, on a very haunted street. Um, Everything on that street is haunted, and everybody's had some kind of paranormal experience. I've talked to some of the neighbors, and it's just quite interesting. And so she said, "Joe, can you come in?" She's like, "We're having all these experiences again." This is where they've saw like the shadow hat man that like people hear about, right? And she actually got a picture of it, like things like being moving, like objects moving across the room, all kinds of really interesting stuff. And so she's like, "Joe, can you come and, help bless and clear the house?" And I said, "Yeah." She's like, "We're having some real experiences." And she says it's starting to affect, everybody in the house, and not a good way, in a negative way. And I said, "What did you bring recently in the house?" Intuitively, I was like, because I would go and help her clear like every so often. And the last time we went in, it was, like, just so peaceful, and she's like I'm like, "What did you bring in?" She's like, "I don't know," and she's like, "I can't even, like, think." So, I went in, and there was couple of us there, and everybody decided to s it's, 3-story house, again, an old kinda old Victorian house, and, and I said, what? I need to start in the basement." And she had a deacon from the church there who was actually our cousin come, and everybody kind of stayed upstairs and said, we're going to stay in like prayer and meditation just to kind of do. And I said, that's fine. And I went down in the basement with him, and we were doing prayers and blessings. And there was this door, it was kind of like this, kind of like an old coal where they used to keep coal, right? Back in the day, for like a coal furnace, and the door was closed, and all of a sudden the door started shaking. It's kind of like something out of like a horror film, right? And like sometimes like I'm trying to wrap my brain around it, like, am I seeing this? Am I like it's so surreal. And it just started shaking, and I heard like we heard scratching and literal growling from it. And I said, "Okay, well, here we are." And I said, "I think we need to go like go around and do prayer and blessing." And, he got so freaked out from it, he said, "I think it's better that I go upstairs," and he left me alone in the basement, which is kinda comical now, but back then I was like, "Oh, what's happening?" And, so I went around, and something just told me intuitively, like, "Okay, stay away from the door right now. Let's go around the corner." And as I did that, I was doing prayer and doing blessing, and I had my holy water and oil and all kinds of different things that I utilize. um there was this book that was on like a box, right? And it literally flew at me, like it flew at me, like, and it just didn't drop, it flew at me for like about 6 feet. And like at my head, I had to like duck to the side.
Oh, wow.
And yeah, and I was like, again, I was trying to wrap my head around this, right? Like, am I here? Is this happening? I'm like, stay in prayer, Joanne, stay in prayer. And I heard my gram, right? And my dad would, my dad was really, believed in all of this, and, that was his mom. And like, I like heard like, like just stay the course. And I did. And when I was done and I was done with that, you know, everything kind of calmed down in behind that door as well. And, you know, had to open the door and bless that whole place. And
Yeah.
that was a whole
Now,
experience in its
just
own right.
out
That
of
was,
curiosity, have you ever come up against anything that you couldn't cleanse or you couldn't banish, or you maybe had to call in reinforcements that it took several people working in tandem or in concert to finally lay it to rest?
I did at this particular house, honestly, when I first went in, was like that. And I think that's why um, there was a few of us that they were upstairs staying in prayer because of that. Um, uh, because it's not just, a house that is experiencing paranormal, you know, um, activity, it's the whole darn neighborhood, including the library, which was like a couple of doors down, that's a whole other experience that we went in after hours to the library and had experiences down in their basement. To the person next door, went to their house and had, other experiences. So yeah, I think it's just this congruent energy mass. I almost say it's like a portal in that whole neighborhood that was opened. And so things just kind of come in and out. And like, unless you're like on top of the cleansing and the protecting and doing all of that, it may take a few times or more to
Yeah.
do that.
Or you could, in a neighborhood situation, I read a book recently. I can't remember the name of it, but it was about a neighborhood like that where every house in the area was haunted, some to
Yeah,
more degree than others. But it talked about that one homeowner might have people come in and bless it and cleanse it, and then it would just move over to another house, and then the
correct,
activity would increase over there, and it just kept moving up and down the street. And that's
correct.
frightening to me that it just goes somewhere else, and could come
It
back
does.
and bring
It
more with
does.
it.
It does. That's when, like, I learned, I was really blessed to learn from some really amazing mentors in my life. And, you know, one that I learned from was this Cherokee medicine man. And he really taught me, like, you know, um, how to do some of this work. And, he said when you do a cleansing, you have to literally, like, have either the earth absorb it, and that's how I take it, right? And or, like, be able to, quote, unquote, "banish it" so it doesn't move on to another home or person or, whatever. And, and in a neighborhood like that, like, it's quite interesting because, again, you don't want to have other people experience even more activity,
Right.
because
Yeah.
because you decide that you're like, oh yeah, what's not here, go over to the next door neighbor's
Yeah.
house. So yeah,
And
that's a
I've
whole
heard of
different
some
story.
of the people that do those banishings and stuff, they do a binding of these
Correct,
things before they cast it out so it doesn't go somewhere and
correct.
bother somebody else. It's fascinating, fascinating stuff.
It is. It's really quite interesting. And, as I've been doing this for, many, 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 many moons, as I say, over 35 years, I've been doing a lot of this stuff. And, you know, uh, I just keep learning. Like it's just such a amazing learning experience from helping
Well,
people
and
cross
I have to
over.
ask you, was it
Yes,
something you chose to do, or is it something that picked you and you just found out you had the proclivity to be able to do it?
I think it picked me, Steve. I really do. I think it was a calling, you
Yeah,
know. I don't think this was something. Even though I'm really grateful for what I do, I really am, and I've met some really amazing people and been able to do really, just really grateful. I don't know if I would have necessarily chosen this path,
yeah. I think it's one of those things you don't just wake up one day and say, I'm gonna learn how to clean ghosts out of houses.
That's
I
true.
think you slowly over time realize that you have this ability to be able
Correct.
to do these things, and
Correct. Yeah, correct. And, I don't think woke up and, like, I was like, "Oh, yeah, I'm ready to, take on a growling, scratching thing behind a door," or whatever that it might be. Again, it's just been my honor to be able to help people or
yeah,
help spirits move on,
and that is because
that's
it's
one of
not
my things.
something everybody can do. I've heard of people that have
Yeah,
had somebody come in and cleanse and didn't know what they were doing and made things worse.
correct.
I think that happens sometimes. Now, in your opinion, are some of these entities, if you want to call them that, is there a demonic side of that? I mean, you mentioned the scratches and things like that. Usually, when I hear of cases like that, there's something demonic or something evil there, particularly the 3 o'clock in the morning, or three
Right,
scratches, or which I've heard is the mocking of the Holy Trinity, and that's how
right.
it identifies itself as something evil. Do you believe in that school of thought as well?
I do, I do. I don't think it's as prevalent as, like, how we see on, like, TV, like, everything is, demonic or I think I do believe that exists. And I've seen it from my own eyes, believe it or not. And maybe that's another story for another day. That's really an interesting story, a couple interesting stories that I have. But you know, I think sometimes some of that can also be poltergeist activity, for a lack of a better term, I guess. That just is, maybe there has been an accumulation of anger and frustration and whatever it has been, and it creates its own energy, and so it decides that and it becomes its own thing. And because emotions, right, are really powerful. And when we try to rid ourselves of it, or when we don't know how to walk through it or heal it, I believe that it can, again, those are the droplets that we leave, right? And I believe it can become something. It's energy, and it's always, energy never dies, and so it has to transform into something. And so I believe, like, that is the possibility, that happens. And so, and sometimes I believe it's just angry spirits who maybe are angry that they're still here, or
Yeah,
angry that something
I think
happened, and
that
so
some
they
of that.
decide they're going to, like, be mean and do scary things.
Yeah,
And so I think it's about knowing those subtle differences.
yeah, knowing the intent of that.
Correct.
And Cisco Murdoch and I have had that conversation. Now, have you ever watched any of the episodes that I'm on over there with her on Journey Through the Gate Paranormal
I
Portal?
have, absolutely. Yes, I
And
have.
she's been a
Great.
guest on this show. Right now, she holds the record. She's been on 3 times, I think. And we've had some interesting discussions on those. And there's a real interesting quote. It's attributed to St. John, the evangelist, St. John the Baptist, the author of the book of Revelation. But none of the dead come back, but some stay. And I think there's some stuff in that
Yeah.
it lets us know that some of these things are dead that have stayed behind, and then some of the things that we deal with and encounter aren't people at all, never were there, or elemental or some kind of spirit. And
Correct.
again, that's probably a discussion for another time when you get into the Nephilim and the fallen angels and all this. I think there's some
Absolutely.
demonic things out there, but not everything.
Correct, not everything. And I think, I think that's sensationalism that has been out there, um, you know, and I think it's just knowing, it's educating yourself and knowing the difference.
Yeah.
And and if you don't, ask somebody who does, that you trust, who may know. And I think that's important as well.
Yeah. Well, unfortunately, we're running up against the clock
Yeah.
here. Do you have any parting thoughts for the listeners, Joanne? And then I'd like for you to tell people where they can find you.
Sure. I just want to thank everybody, and thank you, Steve and Nicole, too, for having me
Oh, our pleasure. Nicole
today.
produces these episodes, and I'm the voice behind the microphone, but it's been a pleasure talking to you.
I really have enjoyed myself, and I thank you for having me on and listening to me, and thank you all out there in Cyberland for listening. And I hope that maybe you've heard something that you know may sound familiar to you, or maybe learned a little something. And I just appreciate being able to share my stories with others.
And again, thank you so much. We appreciated you being here. And thank you for the friendship that you have with Nicole and some of the help that you've given us with things that we're working on together. Um, so, how can people get a hold of you if they're have a necessity for what the services you offer? Let me state it that way.
Sure. Thank you. Thank you. So, my business is called Spiritual Revolutions, and I have a website, spiritualrevolutions.org. You can certainly go over there and kind of peruse and see a little bit about who I am, and services that I have. And you can also get in touch with me at Joanne, Joann, M as in Mary, 1313 at yahoo.com, and you can certainly send me an email, and I would love to get back to you, for sure.
Awesome. Well, thanks again for being here.
Thank
And
you.
I know not only do you come to our shows that Nicole and I have on Among the Missing, but I see you in the audience all the time over on Lee G First Floor Audio's channel, and he'll be on this same episode. He came on before you did and talked about some of his experiences.
I look forward to hearing that.
Childhood later. He's got some fascinating stories. And coming up, he and I are going to be doing a show. Nicole's got another channel in the pre-development called From Beyond, and it's going to be like Lee and I will be the hosts, host and co-host, if you will, or two co-hosts, and we'll talk about things, and then we're going to have guests come on and talk, and maybe you'd like to come on there sometime and join us, and you're always welcome to come back here on Everything Out There on the Clyde Lewis Ground Zero Radio Network.
Thank you. I would love to come back, and I would love to be on and talk with you and Lee. So thank you so much.
Oh, a pleasure. Again, thanks for being here, Joanne. That's going to wrap it up for this episode of Everything Out There. I'm Steve Stockton. I'll see you a little further on down the trail. Tell your animals I said hi. Good night, everybody.